Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ambassador's Lounge. Today we have with us Ambassador Masood Khalid, a veteran diplomat and a senior colleague. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me first introduce Ambassador Masood Khalid briefly. He was our ambassador in Seoul, our High Commissioner in Kuala Lumpur, and then he served for 6 years as Ambassador of Pakistan to Beijing. Therefore, he is somewhat an authority on China, and we are going to ask him questions about the internal politics as well as China's position, its foreign policy vis-a-vis the rest of the world, its policies in South China Sea, in Taiwan, etc. Sir, my first question to you, it's internal politics of China. This third unprecedented tenure of President Xi, how do you see that? He had to amend the constitution to go for the third term, and there is a talk also that he might go for a fourth term as well.
Well, thank you very much. I think first of all we have to understand the context in which this decision was taken. First of all, China has fixed some national targets to be achieved by 2049. Their first target was to eliminate acute poverty by 2021, which was last year, and that was the 100 years of the Communist Party of China. And they did achieve that. Then the next target is 2035, when they want to raise the per capita income from the existing, about $30,000 or so, to bring it, to make it double. And by 2049, they want to achieve the final national objective, which are called the national, rejuvenation targets of making China into a fully prosperous, this within quotes, fully prosperous, modern and democratic society. Now, these are the targets, these are the national goals for which China is striving. At this point in time, in their perception, China could not afford any weak leadership. And President Xi Jinping has come, he has risen from the ranks in that way. And he has a very wide experience of, because in Chinese system, when you are a party secretary of a province, that means it is the highest post there. And he has served as party secretary at least in, I think, 4 provinces. And the last one was Shanghai. And there he was, then from there he was elevated as vice president and then the president. So the party decided, not Xi Jinping, that there should be a continuity, and for the sake of continuity, his leadership is required. So party decided that he should be given an extension. And of course, in the last 10 years or so, he has, built a circle of associates and comrades who support this. But this is not an individual's decision. This is a party decision. I think this should be kept in mind. This is very important because Chinese system, which is of course a very different system from the Western governance system, it believes and it practices very much the process of consultation within the party, and these are very strong consultation. So no individual is in a position to sort of override the rest. So this is a party decision. I don't know whether he will go into the 4th term or not, but for continuity, and in any case, Chinese leaders have long lives, so longevity, we never know.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined today by Ambassador Riaz Bukhari. Riaz, up to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome to the Ambassador Lounge today, sir. It has been a bit late, but never too late that we are having you over here. I will talk about, sir, Chinese foreign policy, particularly in the South China Sea area. it is regarded as the most assertive foreign policy, and we see its reflection, in certain areas like, Taiwan, South China Sea, India as well. So how do you see its impact in the region, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, I would say, because Australia, Japan, ASEAN, United States, and the UK are also involved in that. Do you see Chinese assertive foreign policy will contribute to maintaining peace in that area?
Well, I think China is trying to, position itself as a co-equal of the United States. So it is no longer a China which was, which you could trace back to 1949 or 1950 when it was embroiled in its own internal problems and issues. China is coming up. China is now the second largest economy. So Chinese leadership and Chinese party, Communist Party, believes that China has to play a role which is assertive but not aggressive. And in order to, create that balance, especially in the Asia-Pacific region, China is trying to assert itself, especially in regard to the core issues like Taiwan, which is, of course, very important and a kind of a red line for China. So that's why you will see that Chinese have gradually, increased their defense expenditure, and they are trying to reach out to the world through this BRI initiative. They have expanded their financial and economic, footprint all over the world. So gradually, China has expanded itself in terms of strategic assertiveness, if you call it. Now, this is also geared at self-defense, because Chinese, especially in the current scenario, in the current context, Chinese are feeling that they are being encircled. They are being, there is a ring which is being drawn around them. And you have yourself given the example of Australia, AUKUS, this Quad. And then here in our vicinity, I2, U2, and then the foundational agreements of the United States with India, this strategic nexus between USA and India. So if you combine all these permutations and all these developments, you will see that China feels and believes that it has to counter this aggressiveness on the part of the United States and its Western allies. So China, I don't think that China is going for an aggression or a military adventure.
So but if I may intervene here. First of all, you said its policy is not aggressive. How would you define its policy in the South China Sea when it is claiming 85% of South China Sea as its own? And this is on the basis of, it says, historic ownership. It's against the UN laws of sea. Plus, you see, because it is because of reclamation of land in South China Sea, militarization of these islands. So how would you define these things then?
Reclamation of land has not been done only by China. That has also been done by Philippines and other regional countries. So yes, I agree with you. China invokes its territorial claim or claim in the South China Sea on the basis of that 9-dash line.
Yes.
And it goes back to some historical reference from 1919 or something. Yes, this I agree that it's a dispute between the countries in Southeast Asia and China. But the negotiations are going on the code of conduct and all that. That's its.
So China lost in the international UN in the International Court of Justice.
They did not
accept the decision.
Accept that decision. So that is a tiff between. But at the same time, ASEAN is their largest trading partner.
Exactly.
Now. And ASEAN countries are quite uncomfortable in choosing between United States and China. So, I mean, this is the balance. I don't think that China will, because given what is happening in Indo-Pacific region, given what's happening in South China Sea in terms of militarization and enhanced naval presence of the Western flotilla and navies, China would not like to go for a military adventure unless it is imposed, you see. And the reason for that is that in the last 40 years, China has gained tremendously in economic development. It has emerged as the second largest economy. They don't want to squander this. That's why there's kind of a paranoia also, if you may call it, that there should be stability within China.
Yeah.
There should be no destabilization by external power or by internal, any developments. Okay. So this is number one preoccupation of policy. Second is that we will continue to move ahead, and if there is a military adventure or military engagement, then this process will be stalled. So right now they are in a very difficult situation. They are facing these challenges that the United States is putting pressure on them, and it's making a coalition of countries to exert pressure on China.
But don't you think other countries are threatened by China's aggressiveness? Even ASEAN, sir. No. ASEAN has moved towards the US.
No.
They have strategic relationship with agreements with US.
The ASEAN is divided because if you talk of Cambodia, if you talk of Laos,
they are,
if
of course,
you talk
yes,
of Thailand,
China, yes.
A lot of investment is going on in these countries by China. They are connecting in Thailand. They are doing big projects. They are doing big projects in Indonesia. So the ASEAN countries are divided. Nobody is going to compromise, its financial and economic interest. And I can give you a recent example. German Chancellor, despite opposition,
visited China.
Visits China,
yes.
Because Germany and China's relationship is extremely important, especially in the economic domain. Similarly, yesterday, Australian foreign minister
visited China, yes.
visits Beijing.
Yes.
Now, Australia depended 40% of its exports to China. It's a big market.
Yes.
So my point is that geoeconomics will determine the geopolitics in a way, or vice versa.
So, sir, another big market is Middle East for Chinese products, as well as supply of oil from the Middle East to China to sustain its economic development. President Xi was in Saudi Arabia, held meetings with GCC leadership as well as Arab League leadership, some of them. So how do you see Chinese interest, in Saudi Arabia as well as in the GCC countries, while on the other hand we see US losing some of its grounds from the kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
US will not give up on the Middle East.
For more
but
confrontation
at the same
over
time,
there?
China will not like to replace United States in this security domain in the Middle East. Okay, so China is expanding its economic footprint, and the reason is that China needs oil supplies. China's energy requirements are humongous. Saudi Arabia is their largest oil supplier. And so is Iraq, and so is, and of course on that side, Russia is also supplying. So this is a very important development which took place, that President Xi went there. And if you look at the joint communique which was issued after the visit, it is nothing else but economic content.
Exactly.
A lot of projects about, 34 MOUs signed, $30 billion projects. So Saudi Arabia also, I think, wants to balance its relationship. Its military dependence is of the United States, and the United States remains important in terms of traditional ties with Saudi Arabia and its presence within the Gulf region. But China would like to, I think, China will continue to expand its economic without, putting, disturbing American US arrangement in the Middle East. And they have Israel also, which has a strategic partnership with the United States. So it's a very complex but very interesting game which is taking place in our neighborhood. within South Asia, look at South Asia, what's happening.
Sir, we're coming back to again this Middle East. Now, you're right in pointing or saying that China would not like to replace the US.
But not in security domain.
Security domain, obviously. But now, US guarantees security for the GCC. How would they allow China to take over the economic, go ahead with the economic dominance?
China has more economic muscle. If you look at the statistics of American investments and Chinese investments, you'll be surprised how much China is investing. Look at Taiwan, for example. Taiwan has about, I think, if I'm not wrong, $200+ billion trade with mainland. And US trade with Taiwan is only $63 or $64 billion. Yet, they are, encouraging Taiwan to declare independence. That is red line. Now, let me also briefly point out what's happening in our region. That's very important. Middle East is still a little far. Yes, it is of extreme consequence for us what happens there. But what is happening in South Asia? We are in this triangular relationship, conflictual relationship, India, Pakistan, US, China, China, India. And we are right in the middle of it. And you know the pressures which Pakistan is under, facing right now from India, from the United States. So this situation is very complicated, globally very complicated, but in our region also very complicated. So we have to, I think, factor that in. And Middle East is important for us, but our own region, we are not being allowed to, sort of carve and I mean, we are under pressure in terms of, having a balanced relationship between China and the United States.
Pressure from which side?
You know which side? United States. They are opposing United States, India.
Yeah.
I mean, they're opposing BRI, they're opposing CPAC.
Exactly.
So just one, coming back to the Middle East thing. US, when it had its influence there, it still has it. It never tried to bring about rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It was antagonistic towards Iran. Now, China is in a unique position. It has friendly relations, economic relations, diplomatic relations, both with China as well as Saudi Arabia. Now, for the sake of its own trade, for the sake of its own, because trade requires, its prerequisite of trade is peace. Yeah. Can China, will China play a mediating role between these two countries? Can they play?
I don't think so.
But their foreign minister once did.
I don't think so that China would like to, intervene or mediate at this point in time. And Saudi Arabia and Iranian relations are also so complicated. And this rivalry, I think, it's very difficult to, unless there is a change of heart in the leadership and the policies of Iran and Saudi policies, although they have met, the foreign ministers, they met in Jordan recently. But China will see, China follows a policy of wait and see. Look at Afghanistan also. They have interest in Afghanistan, very clear interest, and they are maintaining a full-fledged embassy there. But they are still following wait and see policy.
Sir, Ukraine crisis. It is impacting, in fact, the global food security, global peace as well. China again has an important role over there. China has been supporting, Russia. But of late, we see some change in the, Chinese foreign policy on Ukraine crisis. How do you see Chinese role in achieving peace in Ukraine and that region?
You see, what has happened is, because of this containment strategy of the United States, China and Russia have come closer to each other. Yeah. And the February visit of President Putin to Beijing was historic. Yes. So Chinese and Russians feel that at this point in time, when they are being encircled, when they are being pressurized, they have to stand by each other. So this is the overarching objective. And if you analyze this, analyze in that background or backdrop, you will see that China does not wholly support President Putin's
Yes.
policy in Ukraine because it's also a permanent member of the Security Council. But at the same time, it does not want to disturb its newfound equation with Russia. Historically, Russians and Chinese have been antagonistic, but now there is a bonhomie. Now they are, strategic partner, even in our region, Shanghai Cooperation Organization and all that. There's this partnership, which is also of great disturbance to the United States, which wants to contain, both China and the Russian Federation.
Do you think that China was expecting Ukraine war to prolong this much? I mean, isn't Russia becoming a liability? Russia is getting weaker.
I think so. I think that Russians have miscalculated, and they are not achieving the targets which they had in mind. I think their strategy is to have a face saving somehow.
Yeah.
Because they are incurring, huge losses.
Yes.
Face saving, and whatever area they have occupied so far, that is legitimized. But on the other hand, United States wants this war to continue. Sorry, ma'am, I may sound outlandish, but the way Ukraine is being supported, militarily, today they announced
exactly
the supply
huge
of
amount,
Patriot missiles.
Yes.
So West is really pushing Russia also into a corner, whereby some kind of settlement is not possible, or Russia is Russia is embarrassed if it is thrown back out of the areas which it has occupied. I don't know. The American strategy is basically to corner Russia in Ukraine, and maybe Putin wants to get out of this situation.
Yeah. Sir, CPEC, BRI, we are really, we appreciate our Chinese great friends to undertake a number of projects under CPEC for the economic development in Pakistan. But CPEC and BRI is also accused of debt trap. How do you comment on that? I don't want to prolong the question, but you understand what I mean.
Chinese debt, Pakistan's foreign debt is about $130 billion.
Yeah.
And Chinese debt is about $26 billion cumulative. This is cumulative figure. And this also includes basically the G2G infrastructure projects and this and that. But we have given the nature of the relationship, we have an understanding with China, whereby China helps us, and has helped us in bailing us out, or when Pakistan has faced problem, even now balance of payment support, rollovers. So I don't think that you have a debt trap as such at this from China. I don't think so.
But it is accused of, in
other
Africa,
countries,
in Sri Lanka,
Africa, they have dispensed with certain debts of certain countries.
Okay.
They have waived off the
So
loans.
they started projects which were not financially feasible,
but
economically
their strategy
feasible.
is not to waive off like that. They are not going to make a blanket announcement of waiving off the loans, because that is not their strategy. But individually, they give concessions, they sort of waive off, and through understandings with individual countries bilaterally.
Okay.
But I don't know, our main debt is to on commercial lending and IFIs. I was reading a study that 100 million people have gone into poverty in the last 1 year because of the this Ukraine war and pandemic, global pandemics. So and about 60 countries, low-income countries, developing countries, are facing a debt problem. So we have an issue, but why don't we get our act together?
Exactly.
Why don't we improve our own economy and establish an enabling environment for industrialization so that our exports grow and our foreign exchange reserves.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, this was our program. There's a lot of things we could still be discussing with Ambassador Masood Khalid. He has that knowledge, he has that information. We will again invite Ambassador again to our program to discuss these things further. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a nice day.